JUBBARD Price, DOC number 552697. You are a second class offender. Parole eligibility date 7/23/2018. Your good time date is 12/13/2024. Full term date is 7/1/2025. So 20-year sentence. Official offender, law of negligent homicide, 2 counts. That sound correct?
Yes, sir.
Would you please answer Mr. Marabella's question?
Good morning, Mr. Price. How are you?
Good morning. How you doing yourself?
I'm doing fine. My name is Tony Marabella. I've got some questions I'm going to ask you today. How old are you?
30 years old, sir.
30 years old. And how old were you at the time you committed this crime?
I was 21.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about what happened. I'm a little confused about what your role is in this case.
That's another thing. Like 3 days before the event happened, the young man who committed the offense, my fall partner, my cousin, my co-defendant, she brought him over to my relative's house to meet us for the very first time. So after meeting him, like 2 days later, she called me and asked me did I wanted to smoke marijuana with him. I said, yeah. So I caught the bus over there, going to her house, and we were supposed to go to her mother's house. So when we get there, we meet the dude who she brought to my grandmother's house for us to meet for the very first time. So he said we're gonna go to his house and smoke.
I'm interested in knowing what happened when these 3 people were murdered.
I ran out the house, sir. It was in transcripts too. I brought transcripts with me, trial transcripts.
All right.
I ran out the house, sir.
All right. Tell me a little bit about what you've done while you've been in prison. What kind of programs have you done?
I achieved my GED. I completed AANA. I completed Living in Balance. I completed Vest Prep. And I also accomplished getting my SS scores. I had got my SS scores to get in college.
Okay. Tell me a little bit about your disciplinary record.
I got a few aggravated disobedience. They might seem big, but they ain't major as they seem. All
right, you've got 15 write-ups and you've been in jail about 8 years. Is that right?
9 years, sir.
9 years. You got 15 write-ups. You had a write-up January of last year. What was that about?
That was unprofessional relationship with a correctional officer.
What does that mean?
I had wrote a love letter.
You've got a pretty good history. You've got a pretty significant history, although nonviolent as a juvenile and as an adult. You've got some weapons charges. You were out on supervision and you were revoked. Tell me why I should let you out, why I should vote to let you out based upon your history. How have you changed?
I understand that live in society, you got to follow rules, and I'm ready to follow rules now.
Well, what's the difference between now and the time you came to prison?
My mind is mature.
Well, how did that occur?
Going through the process of experiencing the things that I experienced.
Well, tell me what you've experienced.
Shoot. Like I learned, like,
Are you frozen or you're just not saying anything? I can't tell.
Nervous.
Okay, I accept that. What do you think about the fact that you were involved in a crime that ended up with 3 people dead?
That ain't good. That ain't good.
Well, You went to trial. I mean, and I accept, look, I accept the legal system. You went to trial for murder and kidnapping, and they acquitted you of those, but they found you guilty of negligent homicide. But you still were involved, and you are in prison as a result of 3 people being dead. What do you think about that? I mean, what are your thoughts? Have you given some consideration to your actions that caused this?
Yes, sir.
Well, tell me about that.
It's complicated.
Speak up.
Complicated.
Complicated, okay? How is it complicated? What would you say to the family of the people that were killed today if they were here looking at you? What would you say to them?
Tell them I apologize. I wish that deal would have never happened
And why?
because it was stupid.
How far did you go in school?
I stopped going after the 9th grade.
Okay, but you did get your GED?
Yes, sir, I did.
What other educational things have you done while you've been in prison?
Like, I tried to get into the community college due to they unable to have an instructor come off the streets. That's been on a standstill.
What kind of work have you been doing while you've been in prison?
Just in educational. Right now, I'm in VOTEC.
And what are you studying for VOTEC? What is your,
Small
what's
engine,
your, I'm
small-
sorry?
small engine repair.
Who was Don Johnson?
That was my second time ever meeting him. I didn't even know his name until the preliminary hearing.
Most everybody's opposed to your getting out. Law enforcement is opposed to your getting out. What kind of plan do you have? I mean, where would you live if you were to get out of prison?
With my mother, she's right there.
Where did you live when all of this happened?
With my grandmother on my father's side.
All right. I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Renatza?
I don't have any questions. I'll just, I'd like to hear from Warden Bickham.
Good,
Warden?
good morning. Yeah, good morning still. I had to check my clock to make sure. How y'all doing today?
Good.
Good to see y'all. You know, I interviewed him the other day. He seems to have some communication issues when I try to talk with him. You know, I think that's part of when you asked if he was frozen earlier. He seems to have some issues there, but as far as going through his record, you know, it's not stellar. It's not stellar. You know, he went for 2 years, it looks like, without a write-up from 18 to 20, roughly about 1.5 years, but then he had that write-up. So I'm not so certain he doesn't need just a little bit more time to maybe learn some things. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you. All right, now we'll hear from Miss Dion Baptiste. Take your mute off. All right,
Hi, how you doing? Good evening.
good.
I'm Dion Baptiste, JUBBARD Price mother. When y'all grant him parole, I have a stable environment for him to stay. I work. I don't get no kind of assistance. I work for everything that I get. I don't get food stamps or anything. I think that I could be a productive role model for my son if you put him in my own care. My house is a drug free. We don't drink. We don't do anything that's inappropriate. I just, and I love my son, and I think, and I know that he learned from his lesson, and his mind has matured. He's not the same young man when that had happened when he was 21 years old. He's 30 now.
All right, Yes, ma'am. Thank you. All right, we'll hear from Miss Dorothy Scott.
Good morning. My name is Dorothy Scott. I am JUBBARD Price aunt. And as a child, as he was growing up, he always have been very shy. I just felt like he was at the wrong place at the wrong time, getting into a situation that he should have never gotten into. Um, After spending all these years in jail, I really honestly believe if he get granted parole, he could change his life. And I wanted to tell him that I love him, and if he need anything, I'm always there for him. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, JUBBARD, would you like to make a statement on your behalf?
This is the time for you to make a statement.
Go ahead and make a statement. You'd like to make a statement of why you think you should be let go early, go ahead and make your statement.
You want to or not? He declines to make a statement.
Okay, you don't want to make a statement?
What's up?
Okay. Fine, all right, is the panel prepared to vote?
Yes.
Attorney Marabella?
Mr. Price, I realize you're nervous, and certainly I'm not going to hold anything against you for your not making a statement or anything like that. I appreciate the fact that this is probably a difficult situation for you to be in, so I do understand that. But I do have some concerns. The crime itself is extremely serious. 3 people have been killed. You were found guilty of negligent homicide. You weren't found guilty to be the killer, but you nevertheless were found guilty of negligent homicide. You were sentenced to 20 years in prison as a result of what you did and your past history. Based upon your past history, your poor supervision, your poor disciplinary record thus far in prison, law enforcement opposition against you would be my vote today to deny your parole.
All right, Ms. Renatza?
Mr. Price, I want to congratulate you on the work that you've done getting your GED. That's a major accomplishment. And the work that you've done, I see you've been involved with AA and Living in Balance, and those are all great things. I do agree with Warden Bickham, though, that perhaps you could benefit from a little bit more programming. I'd particularly like to see you take, I'm assuming it's available there, victim awareness. And it doesn't seem as though there's any indication you've done the pre-release program. But based on the same reasons stated by Mr. Marabella and those I've just mentioned, my vote today is to deny your parole. And if you're able to take some of those classes, you should reapply for another parole hearing. You'll be eligible to do that. Good luck to you, sir.
All right, you have 2 votes to deny your parole. Also, I'm going to vote to deny your parole for the same reasons as stated. There are 3 votes to deny. Your parole has been denied. Good luck to you.
Mr. Marabella asks him, what would you tell the families? And he says, I wish I could take it back. If I could, I would. And it's like, wow, I wonder if I really wonder if this is part of the programs. Is that what they tell them to say? It's everyone says it, including the Parole Project attorneys. I don't know. It's just the most bizarre. And then he says, well, why? Mr. Marabella asks him, why would you tell them that? He said, well, because it was stupid. And yeah, 3 people lost their lives and it was stupid. Now, I think one of the people he's referring to is his co-defendant. They left after they killed him aimlessly. We'll go over the court transcripts. They then got in a shootout with police where one of them was wounded and one of them was, not him, but his co-defendants, one of them was actually killed. So, and all this over, really, I have no idea. Still, because I haven't read the documents. Thank you, Richard. There's actually a lot of information on this. It made the news. It's a lot of different articles, but I felt that going straight to the facts of the case would be the way to go here. Defendant was convicted on January 12th of 2012 in simple kidnapping and negligent homicide in the killings on the same date. It's interesting, but okay, let's just continue reading. On the morning of January 12, 2012, the police received a 911 call concerning a shooting at a residence. The residence owned by Troy, who lived with the family and numerous house guests. Miss Leslie was shot to death that day with his 20-year-old daughter. I mean, can you imagine that? A father and a daughter. Kishana and one of the house guests. Okay, 2 other persons at the residence were shot but survived. So there's 4 people shot so far, 2 killed. Evidence at the trial revealed that Donald Johnson, Andrea Price, and Jubbard Price entered Mr. Leslie's residence and began corralling everyone in the garage. Yeah, so the 3rd person was his co-defendant that Mr. Maribel was talking about. So by giving them false impression that they were all going to smoke marijuana, the defendant stayed in the garage and held everyone at gunpoint. While Andrea Price, Donald Johnson roamed around the residence, presumably looking for a safe. Donald went into the master bedroom and shot Mr. Leslie and Miss Davis in their bed, killing Mr. Leslie and injuring Miss Davis. Andrea Price testified that the defendant pointed a gun at 5 people in the garage and Karis locking and told them to get on the ground. Ms. Price testified that when Raylan Berry emerged from the garage and tried to shoot her, Donald Johnson shot and killed Mr. Berry. So Ms. Price testified that when Raylan Berry emerged from the garage and tried to shoot her, Donald Johnson shot and killed Mr. Berry. Ms. Price also testified that she saw Donald Johnson and defendant taking a large safe out of the house and loading it into Mr. Leslie's car. So I'm not sure if I'm following this right, but does that mean that someone in the house was looking to defend themselves and was shot? She stated that she flagged her car, large safe loading into Ms. Leslie's car. She stated that she flagged the car down and got in. She said that when the defendant stopped at a red light, the police pulled up behind them and ordered them out of the car. She testified that Donald Johnson kept driving and crashed the car into a pool. Andrea Price stated that after the crash, she and the defendant got out of the car. Donald Johnson started shooting at the police, who returned fire and killed him. Andrea Price and the defendant were also shot during the exchange. A safe was found in the vehicle in which Donald Johnson, Andrea Price, and the defendant had been driving. Oh, so he was also shot. Several other witnesses testified, and evidence was introduced during trial. Frankly, I have no idea how he was not charged of the homicide. That's just the way the law works. If you're part of the crime, it's all encompassing. How he's only charged with the lesser charges is pretty insane to me. I mean, it sounds to me like the jury not following instructions of the law, right? I mean, he was clearly involved and people died. That's just the way the law works. You get charged for it. Defendant argues that the verdict of the guilty of simple kidnapping returned by the jurors at count 1 through 5 of the indictment was not responsive to the indictment. All of 5 which charged the defendant with second-degree kidnapping, and he's entitled to have his convictions reversed to count 1 through 5. We find merit to this argument and reverse defendant's convictions and sentences in count 1 through 5, and remand this case for a new trial on those counts. What? I am so confused. They said he should get a new trial. The jury convicted defendant of simple kidnapping, which was found in Louisiana. There are 5 people. There are 5 possible scenarios in the evidence sufficient to support conviction of second-degree kidnapping. I'm just a little confused over here. I'm Let's see. We find that simple kidnapping was not a responsive verdict to the charge offense of second-degree kidnapping in courts 1 through 5 of the indictment. Accordingly, we reverse the defendant's convictions for simple kidnapping counts 1 through 5 and remand the case for new trial on 5. The defendant argues the evidence is insufficient to support his convictions to all 7 counts because we reverse the defendant's convictions on the 5 counts of simple kidnapping. We address only the defendant's convictions for negligent homicide. The defendant was convicted on 7 of 8. Oh, he was convicted in counts 7 and 8 of negligent homicide. In their deaths, negligent homicide is defined. Oh no, that's what he was convicted of, right? But again, how is it negligent? It's killing of a human being by criminal negligence. Okay. Criminal negligence exists when, although neither specific nor general criminal intent is present, there is such disregard of the interests of other offenders. Conduct amounts to gross deviation below the standard of care expected to be maintained and the responsibility of careful man under like circumstances. The evidence presented at trial shows the defendant held 5 people at gunpoint while his accomplice murdered 3 people. Oh, the accomplice murdered 3 people. So Mirabella was not talking about his co-defendant being killed. I didn't realize that. And injured 2 others. He shot 5 people. It's insane. After the kidnapping and murders, the defendant took a safe from the residence of one of the murdered victims and fled in a stolen car. I don't know how he, as a co-defendant, does not get life in prison. It doesn't make any sense. We find the evidence is far more than sufficient to support the defendant's convictions for 2 counts of negligent homicide. The defendant argues the trial counsel rendered ineffective assistance, failing to instruct the jury the effective impeachment of testimony, failing to object that the state was allowed improperly impeach their witnesses, failing to move mistrial. I mean, how did he not? I still don't understand how he didn't get a life sentence for this. I've never seen anything like this. It's capital murder. They don't care who pulls the trigger. I don't understand. Conclusion: for these foregoing reasons, we reverse the defendant's conviction and vacate his sentence and fines for simple kidnapping, count 1 through 5, and we remand the case for new trial on those 5 counts. We further affirm the defendant's convictions and consecutive sentences and fines for negligent homicide in counts 7 and 8. Finally, we grant the state's writ application to vacate the trial judgment. The defendant was not a second felony habitual offender, and remand the matter to state of opportunity to refile a bill. Here's another article. I'm simply lost on the idea that he wasn't charged with. He was indicted with 5 counts of second-degree kidnapping and 3 counts of second-degree murder. That was his indictment. The evidence established that the defendant arrived at the New Orleans January 12, 2012. The promise to lure those persons present into the garage with the promise of marijuana, hold them there at gunpoint, and find their and steal their safe. Some of the victims were successfully lured to the garage, while others were violently forced there by Johnson. Ultimately, the defendant held 5 persons in the garage at gunpoint, while Johnson searched for the safe. In the course of the robbery, Johnson shot several of the victims, killing 3 and maiming a 4th. Defendant and Johnson loaded the safe into a stolen vehicle and fled. They crashed the vehicle while fleeing police. Johnson was killed in the ensuing shootout. The safe was recovered from the vehicle. Following a jury trial, defendant Price was found guilty of 5 counts of simple kidnapping and 2 counts of negligent homicide. They found him guilty of Wow, it's not negligent homicide. This is bizarre. He was sentenced to 5 years at hard labor on each count, plus 5 in reparation. Wow. Defendant Price's second felony offender on a 2009 conviction of legal use of a weapon. The trial court found that the state failed. This is messed up. Wow, this jury failed the justice system, in my opinion. In July 2016, the court affirmed defendant's Price convictions and sentenced negligent homicide, but reversed the conviction of simple kidnapping. I get that he didn't pull the trigger, but that's just not the way the law works. And you know, in some cases, I'm for, like, if, you know, we have seen cases where someone stood outside a house when their co-defendant went in to rob the house without a gun even, but that co-defendant ends up taking a kitchen knife and killing someone inside, and then they both get life sentences. And for those type of cases, like, you know what, he shouldn't get a life sentence. This guy didn't have a violent history. He really thought it was just a robbery. He was standing lookout. He had no idea the co-defendant was going to grab a kitchen knife. In those cases, I don't think they should be tried the same. That's just how I feel. But in this case, please. Not when it's this brutal. No way. I mean, the idea that he's going to be getting out soon, even just on yep. I mean, but that's it. Louisiana, you know, they go on these swings where they're light on crime, and then they're tough on crime, and then they're light on crime. They'll lock people up for life for possession with intent to distribute their defense. But here you go. You might not believe it if you didn't see it, and that's why we do this. I'll put all the links in the description. Thank you, Richard, for putting this, helping connect the dots, put this together. And with that, I will let you go.